The white lace of Beatrice Rosewood's wedding gown caught the New Mexico dust as she stood frozen at the altar of the little church in Glenrio, watching the rear doors swing open and closed in the hot summer wind of 1877, but her intended groom never walked through them. The assembled townspeople shifted in the wooden pews, their whispers growing louder with each passing minute, and Reverend Matthews cleared his throat for the third time, his worn Bible still open to the page he had been preparing to read from for the past 20 minutes. Beatrice felt her face burning hotter than the afternoon sun beating down on the church's tin roof, her fingers clutching the bouquet of desert wildflowers so tightly that the stems were starting to break beneath her white gloves. "Perhaps we should wait just a few more minutes," the Reverend suggested gently, though his eyes held the pity that was making Beatrice's stomach twist into knots. Her father stood beside her, his jaw clenched so tight she could hear his teeth grinding. Thomas Rosewood had spent his life savings on this wedding, on the dress that had been ordered all the way from Santa Fe, on the small reception he had planned at the boarding house down the street. He had been so proud when Charles Whitmore, the banker's son from Tucumcari, had asked for Beatrice's hand in marriage. A banker's wife would have security, comfort, a life far better than the one her father could provide on his small farm just outside of town. "He is not coming," Beatrice finally whispered, the words scraping her throat raw. "Now, Bea, do not say that," her father began, but even as he spoke, they could see the dust cloud approaching from the east, a single rider coming fast. For a moment, Beatrice's heart leaped with desperate hope, but as the horse drew closer, she could see it was not Charles's bay gelding but a gray mare, and the rider was far too slight to be her groom. The rider burst through the church doors, a young woman Beatrice recognized as Sarah Miller, who worked at the hotel in Tucumcari. Her face was flushed and her riding clothes were covered in dust from the hard ride. She looked around the church, her eyes finally landing on Beatrice, and the expression on her face told the entire story before she even opened her mouth. "I am so sorry," Sarah gasped, still catching her breath. "I thought someone should come tell you proper instead of leaving you waiting." Charles left on the morning train to Kansas City. He took Miss Victoria Ashford with him. They got married at the station before they left. The church erupted in shocked exclamations and gasps. Beatrice felt the world tilt sideways, and her father's hand gripped her elbow to steady her. Victoria Ashford was the daughter of the railroad magnate, a woman with a fortune that made even the Whitmore family's wealth look modest. Of course, Charles had chosen her. Beatrice had been a placeholder, a suitable option until something better came along. "Get out," Beatrice said quietly, but her voice cut through the chaos like a knife. "All of you, please just go." The townspeople filed out slowly, their faces showing various mixtures of pity, shock, and in some cases, barely concealed satisfaction at witnessing such a scandal. Beatrice stood motionless at the altar until the last person had left, and then she finally let the bouquet fall from her hands. The wildflowers scattered across the rough wooden floor, their petals already wilting in the heat. "I will kill him," her father said, his voice shaking with rage. "I will ride to Tucumcari and I will kill that boy." "No," Beatrice said, reaching up to remove the veil that had been her grandmother's. "He is not worth it. He is not worth anything." She walked out of the church into the blazing afternoon sun, her white dress a stark contrast against the dusty brown landscape that stretched endlessly in all directions. Glenrio was a small town that sat right on the border where the railroad passed through, a place where cattle drives stopped to water their herds and travelers rested before continuing on their journeys. It was not a place where secrets stayed hidden, and Beatrice knew that by tomorrow, Everyone within 50 miles would know that she had been jilted at the altar. Her father caught up with her as she walked toward their wagon. Wait, let me take you home. I need to walk, she said, though in truth she had no idea where she was going. Home felt impossible, sitting in the farmhouse where her mother had died 3 years ago, where her father struggled to make ends meet, where she had dreamed of escaping to a better life as Charles's wife. She walked past the general store, past the saloon where she could hear piano music starting up, past the boarding house where her wedding reception was supposed to be taking place. She kept walking until she reached the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open-range land, and she finally stopped, staring out at the horizon where the sun was beginning its descent. You planning on walking all the way to Texas in that dress? Beatrice spun around to find a man on horseback watching her from a few yards away. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell past his collar and eyes that were the color of the storm clouds that occasionally rolled across the New Mexico sky. He wore dusty work clothes and a hat that had seen better days, and there was something about the way he sat his horse that spoke of someone who spent more time in the saddle than on the ground. I am not planning on going anywhere, Beatrice said, lifting her chin defensively. And I certainly do not need commentary on my clothing choices. The man dismounted, leading his horse closer. I apologize. That was rude of me. I am Quinn Zimmerman. I have a ranch about 10 miles north of here. He paused, studying her face. I was in town picking up supplies when I heard what happened at the church. I am sorry. Is there anyone who has not heard? Beatrice asked bitterly. Probably not, Quinn admitted. This is a small town, but for what it is worth, I think that banker's son is a fool. You do not even know me. I know enough, Quinn said. I know that you showed up at that church ready to make a commitment and he did not. I know that takes courage and he proved he does not have any. He glanced at the sky where the sun was sinking lower. It is going to be dark soon. Can I give you a ride back to your father's place? Beatrice wanted to refuse, to tell this stranger that she did not need his help or his pity. But her feet were already aching in the impractical shoes she had worn for the wedding, and the thought of walking all the way back through town past all those staring eyes was unbearable. Yes, she finally said. Thank you. Quinn helped her up onto his horse, then swung up behind her. Beatrice stiffened at the proximity, but he kept a respectful distance, his arms steady around her waist to keep her balanced as the horse started moving. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the steady clip of the horse's hooves and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. How long have you had your ranch? Beatrice asked finally, more to break the uncomfortable silence than out of genuine curiosity. 5 years now, Quinn said. I came out from Missouri after the war, saved up enough money working cattle drives to buy some land and start my own herd. It is not much yet, but it is mine. That must be satisfying, Beatrice said, building something that belongs to you. It is, Quinn agreed. Though I will admit, it gets lonely out there sometimes. The nearest neighbor is 8 miles away, and most days the only conversations I have are with my horses and cattle. At least they cannot abandon you at the altar, Beatrice said, then immediately regretted the bitterness in her voice. Quinn was quiet for a moment. His loss is my greatest fortune, he said softly. What, meeting you like this? Quinn explained. If he had showed up at that church like he was supposed to, I never would have had an excuse to talk to you, so his loss is my greatest fortune. Beatrice turned her head to look at him, searching his face for signs that he was mocking her, but his expression was completely serious. You do not know anything about me, she repeated. Then tell me, Quinn said simply. We have got a bit of a ride ahead of us. And so Beatrice found herself talking, telling this stranger about her life in a way she had never told Charles during their entire courtship. She told him about her mother's death, about how she had tried to keep the farm running with her father, but the work was too much for just the two of them. She told him about her dreams of traveling, of seeing places beyond the endless horizon of New Mexico. She told him about the books she loved to read, stories of adventure and romance that seemed so far removed from her real life. Quinn listened without interrupting, and when she finally fell silent, he said, "You should not have to give up your dreams just because one fool did not recognize what he had." They had reached her father's farm by then, a modest house with a barn and a few outbuildings, surrounded by fields that looked dry and struggling in the summer heat. Her father came rushing out when he saw them approaching, relief flooding his face. "Thank God," he said, helping her down from the horse. "I was about to go looking for you." "I am fine, Papa," Beatrice assured him. "Mr. Zimmerman was kind enough to give me a ride home." Thomas Rosewood looked up at Quinn with measuring eyes, the way fathers do when assessing any man near their daughter. "I appreciate that, Mr. Zimmerman. Would you like to come in for some coffee? It is the least I can offer." "I should be getting back," Quinn said, then hesitated. "Though I wanted to mention, Miss Rosewood, if you are looking for work, I could use some help at the ranch. I have been trying to manage the house and the cattle on my own, but the cooking and cleaning keep falling by the wayside. I know it is not glamorous work, but the pay is fair and there is a separate cabin on the property where you would have your own space." Beatrice stared at him. "You are offering me a job. You just met me." "I am a good judge of character," Quinn said. "And I figure anyone who can stand at an altar with grace while their world falls apart is someone with backbone. That is the kind of person I want working with me." He tipped his hat to both of them. "Think about it. The offer stands." He rode off into the gathering darkness, leaving Beatrice and her father standing in the yard. Thomas put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. "Come inside, Bea. You must be exhausted." That night, Beatrice lay in her small bedroom, still wearing the wedding dress because she could not bear to ask her father to help her out of it. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of the house settling, and thought about Quinn Zimmerman's unexpected offer. The idea of running away to work on a stranger's ranch was madness. It was improper. It was exactly the kind of thing that would set the town's tongues wagging even more than they already were. It was also exactly what she needed. In the morning, Beatrice came downstairs to find her father making breakfast, his movements slow and tired. He looked like he had aged 10 years overnight, and Beatrice felt a fresh wave of guilt wash over her. All the money he had spent on the wedding was gone, wasted on a ceremony that never happened. "Papa," she said, sitting down at the table, "I am thinking of accepting Mr. Zimmerman's offer." Thomas dropped the fork he was holding, the metal clattering against the cast iron pan. "Bea, you cannot be serious. You do not know this man. It would not be proper." "Nothing about this situation is proper," Beatrice pointed out. "I am now the woman who was abandoned at her own wedding. Do you think anyone in this town is going to forget that? Do you think Charles's family is going to let this story die quietly?" She reached across the table and took her father's weathered hand. "I need to leave, at least for a while, and we need the money. Mr. Zimmerman said the pay was fair. I can send money home to help with the farm." Her father's shoulders slumped in defeat because he knew she was right. The farm was failing, had been failing for years. The money from Beatrice's wages could make the difference between survival and losing everything. "If he treats you poorly, if anything inappropriate happens, you come home immediately," Thomas said firmly. "I do not care what people say." "I will," Beatrice promised, though in her heart She wondered if she would recognize inappropriate after being courted by a man who had been lying to her all along. 3 days later, Beatrice found herself back on Quinn Zimmerman's horse, this time with a small trunk of her belongings tied behind the saddle. Her father had wanted to drive her out to the ranch in the wagon, but Beatrice had insisted on riding with Quinn. She needed to prove to herself that she was capable of doing difficult things, of facing uncertain situations head-on. The ranch house was larger than she had expected, a solid structure of wood and stone that sat in a valley surrounded by rolling hills. There were several corrals holding horses and cattle, a large barn, and a smaller cabin about 50 yards from the main house. Quinn helped her down and gestured toward the cabin. "That would be yours," he said. "It is not much, but it has a good stove and the roof does not leak. The last family that worked for me lived there before they moved on to California." Beatrice walked to the cabin and pushed open the door. It was indeed small, just one room with a bed, a table, a stove, and a few shelves. But it was clean and the windows let in plenty of light, and most importantly, it was hers. A space that belonged to no one else, where she could close the door and shut out the world. "It is perfect," she said, and meant it. Quinn showed her around the ranch, explaining the daily routine. He woke before dawn to tend the animals, then spent most days either mending fences, checking on the herd, or training the horses he raised to sell. What he needed from Beatrice was help with the cooking, the cleaning, the washing, and the hundreds of small tasks that kept a household running. He also mentioned that he sometimes had ranch hands come through during busy seasons, and it would be helpful to have someone who could feed them and manage the bunkhouse. "I will be honest with you," Quinn said as they walked back toward the main house. "I am not good at the domestic things. My ma tried to teach me before I left home, but I am afraid I was a poor student. Most nights I eat beans and hardtack, and my clothes have more holes than fabric at this point." Beatrice found herself smiling despite everything. "Then I suppose we both benefit from this arrangement. You get a housekeeper and I get away from the pitying stares." "I do not pity you," Quinn said, his gray eyes meeting hers directly. "What I feel is respect. It takes strength to face what you faced. Or perhaps just stubbornness," Beatrice suggested. "Sometimes those are the same thing," Quinn replied. The first few weeks fell into an easy rhythm that surprised Beatrice. She woke each morning to the sound of Quinn moving around outside, tending to the animals. She would wash and dress, then head to the main house to prepare breakfast. At first, she made simple meals, testing out Quinn's kitchen and the supplies he had on hand. But as she became more comfortable, she began to experiment, making biscuits and gravy, frying eggs with peppers from the small garden Quinn had attempted and largely neglected, even baking bread in the temperamental oven. Quinn never failed to express his appreciation. "This is the best meal I have had in 5 years," became a regular refrain, until Beatrice started laughing every time he said it. "You said that about breakfast yesterday," she would point out. "And it was true then too," Quinn would reply with complete seriousness. After breakfast, Quinn would head out to work on the ranch, and Beatrice would tackle the house. Years of neglect had left it dusty and disorganized, but beneath the dirt, she could see the care that had gone into building it. There were thoughtful touches everywhere, built-in shelves and cabinets, windows positioned to catch the morning light, a fireplace made of smooth river stones that must have taken weeks to construct. In the evenings after dinner, they would sometimes sit on the porch and talk. Quinn told her about his life before the ranch, about growing up in Missouri and fighting in the war when he was barely 18. He did not talk much about the fighting itself, but she could see the shadows cross his face when he mentioned those years. He talked more about the cattle drives he had worked afterward, the hard, dangerous work of moving thousands of head across hundreds of miles of open territory. Beatrice found herself sharing things she had never told anyone, dreams and fears she had kept hidden even from her father. She told Quinn about how she had never really loved Charles, how she had agreed to marry him because it seemed like the practical thing to do, the way to secure her future and help her father. She told him how guilty she felt for being almost relieved when Charles did not show up, because some part of her had been dreading a lifetime of pretending to feel something she did not. "You deserve better than practical," Quinn said one evening as they watched the sun set over the hills. "You deserve someone who makes your heart race, who you cannot imagine living without." "Is that how you felt about someone once?" Beatrice asked, curious about this man who seemed so solitary. Quinn was quiet for a long moment. "There was a girl back in Missouri before the war. Mary Ellen Pritchard. I thought I would marry her, thought we would have a farm and a dozen children. But when I came back, she was already married to someone else, a man who had not gone to fight. I was angry at first, but then I realized she made the right choice. I was not the same person who had left. The war changed me, made me someone who needed wide open spaces and solitude more than I needed a white picket fence." "Do you ever regret it?" Beatrice asked. "Not going after her?" "No," Quinn said simply. "Because if I had, I would not be here right now, sitting on this porch with you." Beatrice felt her breath catch at his words. Over the past weeks, she had become increasingly aware of Quinn in ways that had nothing to do with him being her employer. She noticed the way his shirts pulled across his broad shoulders when he lifted heavy objects. She noticed the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. She noticed the sound of his laughter, deep and genuine, so different from Charles's practiced social chuckle. She was falling for him, she realized with a start. Falling for this quiet rancher who treated her with respect, who listened when she talked, who looked at her like she was something precious rather than a convenience or an obligation. But the thought terrified her. It had been less than 2 months since she stood at that altar. Was she just transferring her feelings, reaching for the first kind man she encountered? Was she capable of trusting her own judgment about men after being so wrong about Charles? As if sensing her thoughts, Quinn stood up from his chair. "I should let you get some rest. Morning comes early." "Quinn," Beatrice said, then paused, unsure what she wanted to say. He waited, patient as always, his eyes searching her face in the fading light. "Thank you," she finally said. "For this, for giving me a place to land when I needed it most." "His loss is my greatest fortune," Quinn repeated softly. "I meant that when I said it, Beatrice. I mean it even more now." He walked away toward the barn, where he kept his own quarters in a small room at the back, and Beatrice sat alone on the porch for a long while, her heart pounding in her chest. The next morning, Beatrice woke to an unusual sound, voices calling out in the yard. She dressed quickly and hurried outside to find Quinn talking with 3 men on horseback. They were dusty and trail-worn, with the look of men who had been traveling for days. "Beatrice," Quinn called out when he saw her. "These men are heading north with a herd. They were hoping to rest here for a day and resupply. I told them it would not be a problem." "Of course," Beatrice said, falling automatically into the role of hostess. "I will make breakfast and prepare the bunkhouse." The men tipped their hats to her gratefully, and she hurried back to the house to begin cooking. She made a huge batch of flapjacks, fried bacon and potatoes, and put on several pots of coffee. The men ate like they had been starving, which they probably had been based on the trail rations most drovers survived on. After breakfast, while the men rested, Quinn found Beatrice in the kitchen washing the mountain of dishes. "You did not have to do all this," he said, picking up a towel to help dry. "It is what you hired me for," Beatrice pointed out. Cooking and managing the household. I hired you because I wanted to help you, Quinn corrected. The housework was just an excuse. Beatrice stopped washing and turned to look at him. What do you mean? Quinn set down the towel and faced her directly. I mean that I saw you standing there at the edge of town in that white dress, looking lost and heartbroken, and all I could think was that I wanted to take that pain away. I wanted to give you somewhere safe to be while you healed. The job was just a way to do that without making it seem like charity. So you do pity me, Beatrice said, feeling a confusing mixture of emotions. No, Quinn said firmly. He reached out and gently took her hand, soap bubbles and all. Beatrice, I have been trying to figure out how to tell you this without scaring you off. I care about you. Not because I pity you, but because over these past weeks, I have gotten to know you, the real you, and you are remarkable. You are smart and funny and strong and beautiful, and every morning I wake up grateful that fate or luck or whatever you want to call it brought you into my life. Beatrice stared at their joined hands, her heart racing. I care about you too, she whispered, but I am afraid. What if I am wrong again? What if I am just reaching for something familiar because I do not know how to be alone? Then we will take our time, Quinn said. There is no rush, Beatrice. I am not going anywhere, and neither are you unless you want to be. We can let this develop at whatever pace feels right. What if the town talks? Beatrice asked. What if people say inappropriate things about me living here? Let them talk, Quinn said with a shrug. I stopped caring what people thought about me a long time ago. The only opinion that matters to me is yours. Beatrice felt tears prickling her eyes, but these were different from the tears she had shed over Charles. These were tears of relief, of hope, of something that felt dangerously close to happiness. She squeezed Quinn's hand and then, making a decision, stepped closer and kissed him. It was soft and tentative, nothing like the practiced kisses Charles had given her during their courtship. This kiss felt real, full of genuine emotion and possibility. When they pulled apart, Quinn was looking at her with such tenderness that Beatrice felt her remaining defenses crumble. His loss truly is your greatest fortune, she said, echoing his words back to him, because I think you might be mine. The weeks turned into months, and Beatrice found herself transforming in ways she had not expected. The work on the ranch was hard, far harder than the domestic tasks she had done at her father's farm, but it was also satisfying. She was building something here, creating a real home rather than just maintaining one. She planted a proper garden, coaxing vegetables out of the stubborn New Mexico soil. She mended Quinn's clothes and made curtains for the windows, and even convinced him to let her paint the kitchen a cheerful yellow. But more than the physical changes to the ranch, Beatrice felt herself changing internally. The heartbreak and humiliation of the wedding faded into something that felt more like a narrow escape than a tragedy. She began to see Charles's abandonment not as a rejection of her worth, but as his own failure to recognize what he had. And slowly, carefully, she began to trust her feelings for Quinn. Quinn courted her properly, despite the fact that she lived on his property and saw him every day. He brought her wildflowers from the hills, the same kind she had carried at her almost wedding, but now they held different meaning. He taught her to ride better, taking her out across the ranch land to see the places he loved, the hidden valley where a stream ran year-round, the mesa where you could see for miles in every direction. He read to her in the evenings from his small collection of books, his deep voice bringing the stories to life in the lamplight, and he kissed her slowly and sweetly, but never pushed for more. He was waiting, Beatrice realized, for her to be ready, for her to be sure. One evening in late October, after they had been sitting on the porch watching the stars come out, Beatrice took Quinn's hand and led him toward her cabin. He followed without question, but when they reached the door, he paused. "Beatrice, you do not have to." "I know," she interrupted. "But I want to. Quinn, I am sure. I have never been more sure of anything in my life." That night, Beatrice learned what it truly meant to be loved by someone, not as an obligation or a convenience, but as a choice made freely and joyfully. Quinn was tender and patient, making sure she felt cherished every moment. And when Beatrice woke the next morning wrapped in his arms, she felt like she had finally come home to a place she did not even know she had been searching for. In November, Quinn asked her to marry him. They were standing in the barn, of all places, and Beatrice was holding a pitchfork while Quinn mucked out one of the stalls. It was not romantic by any conventional standard, but when Quinn stopped working and looked at her with those storm-gray eyes and said, "Beatrice Rosewood, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" it felt more real and right than any grand gesture could have. "Yes," Beatrice said, dropping the pitchfork and launching herself into his arms, not caring that he was covered in dirt and hay. "Yes, absolutely yes." They married in December at the same church where Beatrice had been abandoned, but this time everything was different. The guest list was small, just her father and a few of the neighboring ranchers Quinn had befriended over the years. Beatrice wore a simple blue dress instead of the elaborate white gown that still hung in her wardrobe at her father's farm. And when Quinn took her hand and spoke his vows, looking into her eyes like she was the only person in the world, Beatrice knew that this was what she had been waiting for all along. "I promise to love you, to respect you, to be your partner in all things," Quinn said. "I promise to make you laugh when you are sad, to hold you when you need comfort, to give you space when you need solitude. I promise to spend every day trying to be worthy of the gift of your love." Beatrice's own vows came from her heart. "I promise to love you with everything I am. I promise to build a life with you, to face whatever comes together. I promise to never take for granted what we have found, this rare and precious thing. You are my greatest fortune, Quinn Zimmerman, and I will spend my life being grateful for it." When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, and Quinn kissed her in front of God and the small gathering of witnesses, Beatrice heard someone in the back pew whisper, "Well, that is quite a different ending than last time." And instead of feeling embarrassed, she found herself laughing. Because it was different, gloriously and perfectly different. The ranch became truly theirs, a joint endeavor rather than just Quinn's project. Beatrice proved to have a good head for business, helping Quinn negotiate better prices for his horses and cattle. She also suggested they diversify, and together they started raising chickens and selling eggs in town, which provided a steady income to supplement the more unpredictable livestock sales. Thomas Rosewood came to visit in the spring, and Beatrice was delighted to see him looking healthier and happier than he had in years. The money she had been sending home had allowed him to hire help for the farm, and the burden of trying to do everything himself had finally lifted from his shoulders. "You look happy, Bea," her father said as they sat on the porch one evening, watching Quinn work with a young horse in the corral. "I am happy, Papa," Beatrice confirmed, "happier than I ever thought possible." "That Quinn is a good man," Thomas said. "I was worried at first, I will not lie, but I can see the way he looks at you. He loves you something fierce." "I love him too," Beatrice said simply. "Not like I thought I loved Charles. This is real. This is the kind of love that makes everything else make sense." In June, Beatrice realized she was pregnant. She told Quinn one evening after dinner, nervous despite knowing how he would react. He picked her up and spun her around, whooping with joy, then immediately set her down gently as if afraid he had hurt her. "We are going to have a baby," he kept repeating, his face split in the widest grin Beatrice had ever seen. "We are going to be parents." The pregnancy was not easy. The summer heat was oppressive, and Beatrice found herself constantly tired and nauseous. But Quinn was attentive and caring, taking over more of the household tasks and refusing to let her do any heavy work. He fussed over her in a way that might have been annoying if it were not so endearing. In February of 1879, after a long and difficult labor, Beatrice gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas Quinn Zimmerman, after her father and her husband. The baby had Quinn's dark hair and Beatrice's blue eyes, and when Quinn held his son for the first time, Beatrice saw tears streaming down his weathered face. "He is perfect," Quinn whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "You are both perfect." Being a mother was harder than Beatrice had anticipated. The baby seemed to need something every moment of the day and night, and she was exhausted in a way she had not known was possible. But Quinn was a devoted father, walking the floor with Thomas when he cried in the night, changing diapers without complaint, singing off-key lullabies that made Beatrice smile despite her tiredness. "I thought cowboys were supposed to be tough and stoic," she teased one night, finding Quinn holding the baby against his chest and speaking to him in a gentle voice about the horses they would train together when Thomas was older. "I am tough and stoic," Quinn protested, "but this is my son. My boy. How can I be anything but soft when I look at him?" As Thomas grew from a baby into a toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Word spread about the quality of Quinn's horses, and buyers came from as far as Santa Fe and Albuquerque. Beatrice expanded her chicken operation and started selling eggs and dressed poultry to the railroad workers who passed through Glenrio. Together, they saved money and bought more land, expanding their herd and their dreams. One day in the spring of 1881, a fancy carriage pulled up to the ranch house. Beatrice was in the garden with Thomas, who was now 2 years old and obsessed with digging in the dirt. She looked up in surprise as the carriage door opened and a well-dressed woman stepped out. It took Beatrice a moment to recognize Victoria Ashford, or rather Victoria Whitmore now. She looked older than Beatrice remembered, despite it only being 4 years, and there was a tightness around her eyes that spoke of unhappiness. "Mrs. Whitmore," Beatrice said, standing and brushing the dirt from her work dress. "This is unexpected." "I know," Victoria said, her voice strained. "I should not have come, but I had to see you to apologize." "Apologize?" Beatrice repeated, confused. Victoria glanced at the carriage driver, then back at Beatrice. "May we speak privately?" Beatrice called for Quinn, who came from the barn and took Thomas, giving Victoria a long, measuring look before carrying the toddler away. When they were alone, Victoria sank down onto the porch steps as if her legs would no longer hold her. "I am so sorry for what Charles did to you," Victoria began. "I did not know, not until it was too late. He told me you had broken things off, that you had decided not to marry him. He said it was all amicable. I believed him because I wanted to, because I was so foolishly in love." "Why are you telling me this now?" Beatrice asked, sitting down beside her. "Because I am leaving him," Victoria said flatly. "I am going back east to my father's house, filing for divorce. Charles is not who I thought he was. He married me for my money, and once he had access to it, he spent it on gambling and mistresses. He has been cruel, dismissive. Last month he raised his hand to me, and that was when I knew I had to leave." Beatrice felt a complicated mix of emotions. Vindication that she had not been the problem. Anger at Charles for treating another woman so poorly, and something that surprised her, pity for Victoria, who had clearly suffered. "I am sorry that happened to you," Beatrice said sincerely. "No one deserves to be treated that way." "You were lucky to escape him," Victoria said. "I just wanted you to know that. You probably thought his abandonment was the worst thing that could have happened, but it was actually the best. He would have made you miserable just like he made me." They sat in silence for a moment, two women connected by the same terrible man. Then Victoria stood and offered her hand. "I hope you have found happiness here. You certainly seem to have built a good life." "I have," Beatrice said, shaking Victoria's hand. "I married a good man, a truly good man. I have a son, a home, work that I love. Charles did me the greatest favor when he did not show up at that church, though I did not see it that way at the time." Victoria smiled sadly. "His loss was truly your fortune then." After Victoria left, Beatrice stood in the yard for a long time, processing everything she had heard. Quinn came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I am perfect," Beatrice said, and meant it. "I was just thinking about how different my life could have been. If Charles had shown up that day, I would have married him out of duty and obligation. I would have been trapped in a miserable marriage with a cruel man, but he did not show up, and instead I got you. I got this life, this beautiful, hard, wonderful life. His loss is my greatest fortune," Quinn murmured, kissing her neck. "I will never stop being grateful for that." The years continued to pass in a pattern of seasons and milestones. In 1883, Beatrice gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Clara Rose. 2 years later, another son arrived whom they called James. The house that had once seemed so large felt perfectly sized with 3 children running through it, filling it with noise and laughter. Thomas grew into a boy who loved the ranch as much as his father did, following Quinn around and mimicking everything he did. Clara was quieter, thoughtful, content to sit with Beatrice, and learn to cook and sew and tend the garden. James was the wild one, always getting into trouble, always needing to be rescued from whatever misadventure he had gotten himself into. The ranch expanded further. They built a second barn and a larger bunkhouse for the seasonal workers they now employed regularly. They bought more land, more cattle, more horses. What had started as Quinn's modest dream of independence had become a thriving enterprise, one of the most successful ranches in the region. But success brought its own challenges. There were droughts that killed their grass and forced them to sell off parts of the herd. There were harsh winters where they lost animals to the cold. There was the time a neighboring rancher tried to claim some of their land, leading to a tense legal battle that took months to resolve. Through it all, Quinn and Beatrice faced every challenge together, their partnership growing stronger with each obstacle they overcame. In 1889, Thomas Rosewood became ill. Beatrice spent weeks at her father's farmhouse, caring for him while Quinn managed both their ranch and her father's farm. When Thomas finally passed in his sleep one quiet morning in November, Beatrice grieved the loss of the man who had raised her, who had supported her even when she made choices that probably worried him. "He was proud of you," Quinn told her at the funeral. "He told me once that watching you build this life was the greatest joy of his later years. I wish I could have given him more time with his grandchildren," Beatrice said, tears streaming down her face as they stood beside the fresh grave. "He had enough," Quinn assured her. "He had enough to know that you were happy, that you were loved. That was all he ever wanted for you." They sold her father's farm and used the money to fund Thomas's education. At 15, their oldest son had expressed an interest in learning more about business and livestock management, and they arranged for him to spend a year apprenticing with a successful rancher in Texas. It was hard to let him go, but Beatrice knew it was necessary. The ranch would be his someday, his and his siblings, and he needed to be prepared for that responsibility. In 1892, Beatrice and Quinn celebrated their 15th wedding anniversary. They took a trip, just the two of them, leaving the children with a trusted foreman and his wife. They traveled to Santa Fe, staying in a fine hotel and eating in restaurants and visiting the shops and galleries that lined the old plaza. It was the first time Beatrice had been away from the ranch for more than a day or two since they had married, and the freedom was intoxicating. "Do you ever miss it?" Quinn asked one evening as they strolled through the plaza in the fading light. "The life you might have had if things had gone differently. The society parties, the nice clothes, the easier life that Charles could have given you." Beatrice stopped walking and turned to face her husband. After 15 years of marriage, 5 pregnancies, and countless days of hard work under the New Mexico sun, she no longer looked like the frightened young woman in the white dress who had stood at the edge of town. Her hands were calloused, her face was weathered, and there were threads of silver starting to show in her dark hair. But her eyes were bright and clear, full of contentment. "Not for a single second," she said firmly. "Quinn, you gave me something worth so much more than an easy life. You gave me a partnership, a real marriage where we work together and support each other. You gave me children I adore, a home I helped build with my own hands, work that matters. Charles could never have given me any of that because he did not know how to see me as an equal. You do. You always have." Quinn pulled her close and kissed her right there in the plaza, not caring who saw. "I love you, Beatrice Zimmerman. Every day I wake up amazed that you chose me." "We chose each other," Beatrice corrected, "and I would make that choice again and again and again." They returned home to find that Clara, now 9 years old, had organized her brothers to completely clean and reorganize the house as a surprise. It was not perfect, but the effort was touching, and Beatrice hugged each of her children tightly, grateful for this family they had created. The 1890s brought changes to the West. The railroad expanded, bringing more people and more development. Glenrio grew from a dusty stopover to a proper small town with multiple stores, a school, and even a small hotel. The wild frontier that Quinn and Beatrice had known was slowly being tamed, becoming more civilized with each passing year. Their children grew and changed. Thomas proved to be a natural rancher, taking over more of the daily operations as Quinn's body began to feel the effects of decades of hard work. Clara surprised everyone by announcing at 16 that she wanted to become a teacher, and Beatrice and Quinn scraped together the money to send her to the Territorial Normal School in Las Vegas, New Mexico. James, true to his adventurous nature, talked constantly of seeing the world beyond the ranch, though he had not yet figured out how to make that dream a reality. In 1897, Beatrice stood in the same church where she had been married twice, once in humiliation and once in joy, watching as Thomas married a sweet young woman named Elizabeth from a neighboring ranch. As she watched her son speak his vows, she thought about the strange path her life had taken, the way heartbreak had led to happiness, the way abandonment had led to love. Quinn squeezed her hand as if reading her thoughts. "Remembering your wedding days," he murmured in her ear. "Just thinking about how grateful I am for the second one," Beatrice whispered back. That night, after the celebration had ended and they were alone in their bedroom, Quinn pulled Beatrice close. They had slept in the same bed for almost 20 years now, and the comfort of his presence was as familiar as breathing. "You know what I think about sometimes?" Quinn asked in the darkness. "What?" "That day I rode into Glenrio and saw you standing there in that white dress. How I almost did not stop, almost just kept riding because I figured you would not want to talk to some dusty rancher. But something made me stop, made me speak to you. And that one decision changed my entire life." "Mine too," Beatrice said. "I was so lost that day, so sure that my life was ruined. I could not have imagined that, just a few miles away, was the man I would spend my life with, the man who would give me everything I did not even know I needed." His loss truly was my greatest fortune, Quinn said for what must have been the 1,000th time over their years together. But it never got old, that phrase, because it remained fundamentally true. And mine, Beatrice added. Don't forget that it goes both ways. His abandonment was the best thing that ever happened to me because it led me to you. They lay in comfortable silence, listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch at night, the horses moving in the corrals, the wind whistling through the cottonwoods they had planted years ago, the distant call of a coyote on the hills. This was home, this was family, this was love in its truest and most enduring form. By 1900, the new century, Quinn and Beatrice were grandparents. Thomas and Elizabeth had given them 2 grandchildren, with another on the way. Clara had married a fellow teacher and was living in Silver City, teaching at a school for girls. James had finally found his adventure, signing on with a cattle buyer who traveled throughout the Southwest, though he promised to visit home regularly. The ranch was no longer just Quinn and Beatrice's dream, but a family legacy, something that would be passed down through generations. They had added to the original homestead piece by piece, year by year, until they owned nearly 5,000 acres of some of the best grazing land in the territory. They employed a dozen full-time workers and twice that many during the busy seasons. But despite the growth and the success, Quinn and Beatrice made sure to maintain the things that mattered most. They still sat on the porch in the evenings, still talked for hours about everything and nothing. They still rode out together sometimes, just the 2 of them, to see the places they loved. They still kissed each other good morning and good night, still held hands when they walked. One afternoon in the late summer of 1901, Beatrice was in the kitchen making preserves from the wild plums that grew along the creek. She was 52 years old now, her children were grown, and her life bore little resemblance to what she had imagined as a young woman. But as she worked, she found herself humming, content in a way that went soul deep. Quinn came in from outside, dusty and tired, and wrapped his arms around her from behind despite her protests that she was covered in plum juice. "Dance with me," he said. "Quinn, there is no music," Beatrice laughed, "and I am in the middle of making preserves." "The preserves can wait," Quinn said, "and who needs music when I can hear your heartbeat?" So Beatrice let him spin her around the kitchen, both of them laughing like young people, her apron splattered with purple juice and his clothes dusty from the range. It was silly and impractical and absolutely perfect. Later that evening, after dinner, they received an unexpected visitor. A well-dressed man on a fine horse rode up to the ranch, and when he dismounted, Beatrice felt a jolt of shock go through her. It was Charles Whitmore. He looked terrible, she realized as he came closer. The handsome young man she had almost married was now a middle-aged man who had clearly lived hard. His face was puffy and red, his clothes expensive but rumpled, his eyes bloodshot. He was, Beatrice realized, drunk. Quinn stepped in front of Beatrice protectively, his hand moving to the gun he wore on his hip. "You are not welcome here, Whitmore. Get back on your horse and leave." "I just wanted to talk to Beatrice," Charles slurred. "Just wanted to see her, see what she made of herself." "You lost the right to know anything about my wife 24 years ago," Quinn said coldly. "Now leave before I make you leave." "Your wife," Charles laughed bitterly. "She was supposed to be my wife. Did you know that? I was supposed to marry her, supposed to have all of this." He gestured vaguely at the ranch. "But I was an idiot. I chased money instead of something real, and look where it got me. Victoria divorced me, took her money back. Every business venture I have tried has failed. I have got nothing left." "That is not our problem," Beatrice said, stepping out from behind Quinn. She was not afraid of Charles anymore. He was just a broken man who had made bad choices and was now living with the consequences. You made your decisions, Charles. You chose to abandon me at the altar to chase money and status over integrity. Those were your choices, and you do not get to blame anyone else for how they turned out. I made a mistake, Charles said, and to Beatrice's surprise, there were tears running down his face. I should have married you. You were good and kind, and I threw you away for nothing. You are right, Beatrice agreed. You did make a mistake, but the best thing you ever did for me was not showing up at that church. Because if you had, I never would have met Quinn. I never would have built this life, had these children, created this home. Your abandonment was the greatest gift you could have given me, though you certainly did not intend it that way. Charles stared at her, seeming to really see her for the first time. You are happy, he said, sounding surprised. Blissfully, Beatrice confirmed. Now please leave. Do not come back here again. Let the past stay in the past where it belongs. Charles stumbled back to his horse and managed to mount, though it took him 2 tries. As he rode away into the gathering darkness, Quinn put his arm around Beatrice. Are you all right? I am perfect, Beatrice said, and she meant it. Seeing Charles again had not upset her or made her doubt her choices. If anything, it had reinforced how right everything had turned out. He really did do me the greatest favor when he left me at that altar. His loss, my greatest fortune, Quinn said again, pulling her close. Our greatest fortune, Beatrice corrected, because we were both lucky that day, even if it did not feel like it at the time. The years continued to flow like water, bringing changes and challenges and joys. Quinn's health began to fail as he entered his 70s, his body finally succumbing to the decades of hard physical work. Beatrice nursed him through a series of increasingly serious ailments, refusing to let anyone else take over his care. She had promised to be his partner in all things, and that included this. One morning in the spring of 1910, Quinn woke in their bed, looked at Beatrice sitting beside him, and smiled. I have had the most wonderful life, he said. Every single day with you has been a gift. Quinn, do not talk like that, Beatrice said, though she could feel tears gathering in her eyes. You are not going anywhere. We both know that is not true, Quinn said gently. He reached up and touched her face, his weathered hand trembling slightly. But I am not afraid, Bea. How could I be afraid when I have lived such a full and happy life? When I have loved you and been loved by you? When I have children and grandchildren and a legacy that will continue long after I am gone? I am not ready to lose you, Beatrice whispered, the tears flowing freely now. You will never lose me, Quinn promised. I will be with you always, in every sunset over the hills, in every wild horse running free, in every story our grandchildren tell about the ranch we built together. We may not have as much time left as I would like, but we have had more than most people ever get. We have had a lifetime of love, Beatrice. That is more than enough. Quinn Zimmerman passed away peacefully 3 days later, surrounded by his wife, his children, and his grandchildren. The funeral was one of the largest Glenrio had ever seen, with people coming from all over the territory to pay their respects to a man who had been respected and admired by everyone who knew him. Beatrice stood at the graveside, dry-eyed and dignified, though inside she felt like she was breaking into 1,000 pieces. They had had 42 years together, which was more than many couples got, but it still did not feel like enough. It would never have been enough. But as the weeks and months passed, Beatrice found comfort in the life they had built together. She still had the ranch, still had her children and grandchildren, still had the memories of thousands of conversations and quiet moments and loving gestures. Quinn was gone, but the love they had shared remained, woven into the very fabric of the life she continued to live. She stayed on the ranch, refusing her children's suggestions that she move to town or come live with one of them. The ranch was her home, the place where she and Quinn had built their dreams together. Thomas ran the daily operations now, but Beatrice still kept the books and managed the household, still sat on the porch in the evenings and remembered. One afternoon in the summer of 1912, Beatrice's great-granddaughter, a precocious 7-year-old named Rose, climbed up onto the porch swing beside her. "Grandma B, tell me the story again," she demanded. "Which story, sweetheart?" Beatrice asked, though she already knew. "The story about how you and great-grandpa Quinn fell in love," Rose said. "About the wedding that did not happen and how that was actually a good thing." So Beatrice told the story again, the way she had told it dozens of times to her children and grandchildren, and now great-grandchildren. She told about standing at the altar in a white dress, about Quinn stopping to talk to her when she was at her lowest point, about the job offer that was really an act of kindness disguised as employment. She told about falling in love slowly and surely, about building a life together from nothing but hard work and determination and love. And great-grandpa Quinn always said his greatest fortune was that the other man did not show up, Rose asked, even though she had heard this part many times. "His loss is my greatest fortune," Beatrice quoted, smiling at the memory. "He said it the first day we met, and he kept saying it for the rest of his life. And you know what? He was absolutely right. That man's loss was our fortune, mine and Quinn's, because it gave us the chance to find each other." "I want to find a love like that someday," Rose said wistfully. "Then do not settle," Beatrice advised. "Do not marry someone because it is practical or expected. Wait for someone who makes your heart sing, who sees you as a partner and an equal, who chooses you every single day. That is what real love looks like." Beatrice lived to be 84 years old, passing away peacefully in her sleep in the house Quinn had built, surrounded by the family they had created together. At her funeral, her children shared stories of their parents' love, of the way Quinn and Beatrice had shown them what a true partnership looked like. They talked about the ranch their parents had built, the legacy they had left, the love that had sustained them through decades of hardship and joy. And years later, when the great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren gathered at the ranch for reunions and holidays, they would tell the story of Quinn and Beatrice, of how heartbreak had led to happiness, how abandonment had led to love, how one man's loss had truly been another man's greatest fortune. The story became part of the family's history, a reminder that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are actually doorways to our best ones, that love can be found in the most unexpected places, and that the life we planned is not always the life we were meant to live. The ranch still stood, passed down through generations of Zimmermans, each one adding to the legacy Quinn and Beatrice had started. The house had been expanded and modernized, but the original structure remained. The river stone fireplace Quinn had built still warming the main room, the yellow kitchen Beatrice had painted still bringing sunshine into the house. The land still supported cattle and horses, still provided a living for the family that worked it. And on quiet evenings, if you stood on the porch and listened carefully, you might almost hear the echo of two voices, a man and a woman who had found each other when they both needed it most, who had built a life and a love that would endure long after they were gone. His loss had been their greatest fortune, and that fortune had rippled outward through time, touching generations of lives, all because one rancher had stopped to help a heartbroken woman in a white dress, and she had been brave enough to say yes to an uncertain future that turned out to be the greatest adventure of her life.